Look, it's the dumb kid of the divorcee, Mrs. Henderson whispered loud enough for half the gymnasium to hear, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my 8-year-old daughter Maya as she stood beside her science fair project. The other judges snickered, barely glancing at Maya's display before scribbling dismissive notes on their clipboards. Maya's face crumpled, and my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right there in the middle of Jefferson Elementary's annual science fair. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 years ago, I was somebody else entirely. I was the wife of Dr. Marcus Henderson, yes, the same Henderson whose mother had just humiliated my daughter. I was the woman who hosted charity galas in our sprawling suburban mansion, who coordinated school fundraisers, who smiled prettily at country club events while my husband networked with other successful professionals. That version of me died the day I walked into Marcus's office and found him with his 24-year-old research assistant, their bodies tangled together on the same leather couch where I'd once brought him lunch during our happier years. The divorce that followed was brutal. Marcus had connections, money, and a legal team that painted me as an unstable gold digger who'd trapped him into marriage by getting pregnant. The truth was simpler and more painful. I'd been a promising biomedical engineer before Maya was born. I'd graduated summa cum laude from MIT, had 3 patents to my name by age 25, and was on track to lead my own research team at a prestigious medical device company. But when Maya arrived, Marcus convinced me that one of us needed to focus on family. Your career will always be there, he'd said, cradling our newborn daughter. But these moments won't. So I'd given up my career to support Marcus's rise in the medical field, believing in the dream of partnership, of building something together. I'd managed his schedule, entertained his colleagues, and edited his research papers late into the night while he slept. Instead of building our future together, I'd built his success while mine withered away. The settlement left me with barely enough to rent a modest apartment across town. I'd gone from private school galas to working double shifts at a medical device company, assembling equipment for a fraction of what I'd once earned designing it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now building devices I could have invented if I'd stayed in the field. The social circle that had once welcomed me now whispered about my fall from grace. Whenever I dared to show my face at school events, former friends would suddenly become very interested in their phones when I approached, or launch into animated conversations with anyone else nearby. The wife of my former tennis partner had actually crossed the street to avoid speaking to me at the grocery store. But I showed up anyway, because Maya needed me to. Because she deserved a mother who wouldn't let shame keep her hidden. Maya had always been brilliant. Even as a toddler, she'd take apart her toys to understand how they worked, then rebuild them in ways that somehow made them better. While other kids played with dolls, Maya constructed elaborate contraptions from cardboard boxes and rubber bands. She built a pulley system to help her retrieve toys from high shelves, and a sorting machine that organized her crayons by color using nothing but toilet paper tubes and gravity. When she was 5, she'd asked me why Daddy lived in a different house now. I'd knelt down to her level, smoothed her dark hair, and said, "Sometimes grown-ups can't live together anymore, but that doesn't change how much we love you." She'd nodded solemnly, then asked, "Can we build a robot that fixes broken families?" That's when I knew she'd inherited my engineering mind, but with a heart far purer than mine had ever been. For this year's science fair, Maya had spent months working on her project, a prototype water purification system that could be built from common household items. She'd been inspired by a documentary about clean water access in developing countries, and her solution was elegant in its simplicity. She'd tested it dozens of times, documenting every variable, creating charts and graphs that would impress graduate students. Her system used a combination of sand, charcoal, and cloth filters, arranged in a specific configuration that she'd optimized through trial and error. She'd tested it on pond water, tap water mixed with food coloring, and even water she'd deliberately contaminated with harmless material. The results were consistently impressive. Her system removed 99.7% of visible contaminants and significantly improved taste and odor. But none of that mattered to the judges who saw only the daughter of the town's most notorious divorcee. The 3 years since the divorce had been a masterclass in survival. I'd taken a job at MedTech Solutions, a small company that manufactured diagnostic equipment. My official title was assembly technician, but within months, I was quietly fixing design flaws and suggesting improvements that saved the company thousands of dollars. My supervisor, Janet, was a kind woman in her 50s, who'd been passed over for promotions her entire career. She recognized my skills and began involving me in the design process, though my contributions had to remain unofficial. The clients aren't ready for innovation from someone with your job title, she'd explained apologetically. I swallowed my pride and focused on my. Every morning, I packed her lunch with notes decorated with little drawings of molecules and equations. Every evening, we'd sit at our small kitchen table, and I'd help her with homework while she told me about her day. The loneliness was crushing some nights, but Maya's laughter was worth every sacrifice. Our routine became sacred. Maya would burst through the door at 3:30, backpack flying, eager to share every detail of her day. We'd have snacks, usually apple slices with peanut butter while she talked, then homework, dinner prep together, and our favorite part, the evening engineering hour where we'd work on little projects together. I'd started teaching her about engineering principles when she was 6, using everyday objects to explain complex concepts. We'd build bridges from spaghetti and marshmallows, create circuits with batteries and LED lights, and discuss the physics behind playground equipment. She absorbed it all like a sponge, asking questions that challenged even my understanding. Watching her mind work was like watching a flower bloom in fast forward. When she announced her science fair project idea, I'd felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. It was ambitious, sophisticated, and exactly the kind of project that would make her stand out for better or worse. I'd helped her understand the scientific method, showed her how to document her process, and watched with amazement as she took the concepts and ran with them in directions I hadn't anticipated. The project became our evening obsession. Maya would sketch modifications during dinner, test variables on weekends, and present her findings to our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd become an enthusiastic supporter of Maya's work. Even our small apartment began to feel like a laboratory, with Maya's charts and graphs covering the refrigerator, and her prototype taking up half the kitchen counter. The Jefferson Elementary Science Fair was held in the same gymnasium where I'd once attended PTA meetings. As the respected wife of Dr. Henderson, the same space where I'd coordinated the annual charity auction that raised money for new playground equipment, the same place where I'd given speeches about the importance of STEM education, back when people actually listened to what I had to say. Walking through those doors with Maya felt like stepping back in time, but this time I was the outsider looking in. The other mothers were dressed in their tennis club finest, discussing their children's projects while sipping coffee from the good china the school reserved for special events. I recognized most of them, former friends who'd stopped calling after the divorce became public. There was Jennifer Walsh, who'd been my co-chair for the spring fundraiser. She'd actually unfriended me on Facebook the day after the divorce was announced. Lisa Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, had been my tennis partner for 2 years, but she'd canceled our standing Tuesday matches without explanation. Once the gossip started, they acknowledged me with tight smiles and immediate pivots to other conversations. I was a reminder of how quickly perfect lives could crumble, and that made me dangerous in their carefully curated world. Maya didn't notice the social dynamics. She was too excited about her project, bouncing on her toes as she explained the filtration process to anyone who would listen. She'd worn her best dress, a navy blue one with tiny white flowers that I'd found at a thrift store, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun secured with a scrunchie I'd made from fabric scraps. She looked beautiful and brilliant and so very vulnerable. I positioned myself where I could see her table, but tried to stay out of the way. Other parents clustered around the more elaborate displays, the ones with professional-looking poster boards and expensive material. A few projects clearly bore the heavy hand of parental involvement, with sophisticated equipment and polished presentations that screamed Daddy's lab. Maya's project looked humble by comparison. Her poster board was handmade, her materials were improvised, and her presentation was entirely her own work. But the science was solid, innovation was genuine, and the passion was unmistakable. The judging had begun with Mrs. Henderson leading the panel. She was a woman who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow considered herself qualified to evaluate children's scientific achievement. Her son Robert was Marcus's partner in the medical practice, and she'd made it clear during the divorce proceedings that she considered me a social climber who'd gotten what I deserved. She'd approached Maya's table with a predetermined sneer, barely glancing at the detailed charts and working prototype before making her cruel comment about the dumb kid of the divorcee. The other judges had followed her lead, marking low scores without any real evaluation. Maya's face had gone pale, her excited explanations dying in her throat. I'd started to move toward her, ready to comfort her and perhaps remove her from this humiliation. when a voice cut through the murmur of the gymnasium. Excuse me, but did you actually examine this project? A man in his 60s had appeared beside Maya's table. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis. Nothing that would mark him as someone important. But his presence commanded attention. Henderson straightened, clearly annoyed at the interruption. I'm sorry, but this is a closed judging session. Parents and visitors need to remain in the designated areas. The man smiled politely. I'm Dr. James Morrison from the National Science Foundation. I was invited by your principal to observe today's proceedings. He turned to Maya, his expression gentle. Would you mind explaining your project to me, young lady? Maya's confidence returned as she launched into her presentation. She explained the problem of water contamination in developing nations, the principles behind her filtration system, and the cost-effectiveness of her design. She showed Dr. Morrison her test results, her documentation, her improvement iteration. The initial design only achieved 89% contaminant removal. She explained, pointing to her early charts. But when I adjusted the sand-to-charcoal ratio and added this intermediate filtering layer, efficiency jumped. The total cost per unit is under $12 using materials available in most communities. Dr. Morrison listened intently, asking questions that clearly demonstrated his expertise. This is remarkable work, he said, examining the prototype. The efficiency ratio you've achieved with these materials is extraordinary. Have you considered submitting this for patent protection? The gymnasium had gone silent. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was focused on Maya's table. Mrs. Henderson sputtered. Now see here, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm someone who's spent 40 years evaluating scientific innovation. Dr. Morrison interrupted calmly. And I'm someone who's deeply concerned about what I've witnessed here today. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on each judge in turn. This child has created something genuinely revolutionary, and you dismissed it without examination because of, what? Personal grievances against her mother. He pulled out his phone and took photos of Maya's project, her documentation, her test results. With your permission, Maya, I'd like to share this with some colleagues at the foundation. This kind of innovation should be supported, not suppressed. Maya nodded eagerly, then looked at me with eyes shining with pride and vindication. Dr. Morrison wasn't finished. He addressed the crowd that had gathered, his voice carrying to every corner of the gymnasium. I've seen hundreds of science fairs across the country, and I've rarely encountered work this sophisticated from someone so young. The fact that it was nearly overlooked due to personal bias is not just disappointing, it's a disservice to the scientific community. He turned back to Maya, his voice gentle but carrying to the silent crowd. Young lady, have you thought about scaling this design? Because what you've created here could genuinely help millions of people around the world. Maya's face lit up. I've been thinking about that. I made these sketches of how it could work in different climates, and I calculated the materials needed for community-sized systems. She pulled out a notebook filled with additional diagrams and calculations that she hadn't even included in her official presentation. Henderson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is highly irregular. We have our own judging criteria. Criteria that apparently don't include actually examining the work. Dr. Morrison replied, I'll be including this observation in my report to the school board about the quality of STEM education in this district. The aftermath was immediate and devastating for Mrs. Henderson's social standing. Within hours, word had spread through the community about the National Science Foundation representative who'd called out the science fair judges. Parents began posting on social media, questioning the fairness of the judging process. By evening, the local news had picked up the story. 8-year-old inventor nearly overlooked due to judging bias ran on the 6 o'clock news, featuring an interview with Dr. Morrison and footage of Maya's project. The school principal, Mrs. Watson, approached me with profuse apologies. Sarah, I had no idea this would happen. Dr. Morrison was here as part of a statewide evaluation of STEM programs, and he's asked to speak with you privately. Several parents who'd previously ignored me suddenly found reasons to strike up conversation. The same women who'd whispered about my divorce were now asking about Maya's project, trying to associate themselves with the suddenly famous young inventor. Jennifer Walsh actually approached me in the parking lot. Sarah, I had no idea Maya was so gifted. We should get the girls together for a play date. I politely declined, remembering how she'd turned away from me at the grocery store just 2 weeks earlier. But the most significant consequence was for Maya herself. When the science fair results were announced the next week, she'd won first place with a unanimous decision from a new panel of judges that included Dr. Morrison. More importantly, she'd regained her confidence and her joy in science. The video of Morrison's intervention went viral on social media. Maya the inventor began trending locally, and Maya received messages of support from engineers and scientists around the country. A professor from her father's old university even reached out to offer mentorship. Marcus called me for the first time in months. I saw the news, he said awkwardly. Maya's project is impressive. Yes, it is, I replied. She did it entirely on her own. There was a long pause. Sarah, Maya's fine, I interrupted. She doesn't need anything from you right now. Mrs. Henderson quietly resigned from the school board a month later, citing family commitments. The truth was that her behavior had become a liability to her son's medical practice, and Marcus had pressured her to step back from public role. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only relief that Maya would never again have to face that particular form of cruelty. Dr. Morrison's interest in Maya's project opened doors I'd never imagined possible. He connected me with patent lawyers who worked pro bono for promising young inventors. Maya's water purification system was indeed patentable, and the process of filing became a learning experience for both of us. The innovation here isn't just the filtration system, explained Patricia Wong, the patent attorney Dr. Morrison had recommended. It's the specific combination of materials and the optimization process your daughter developed. This could have real commercial applications. More importantly, Dr. Morrison introduced me to Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of research at a biotech startup focused on environmental solutions. When she learned about my background and my unofficial contributions at MedTech Solutions, she offered me a position as a junior engineer. We need people who can innovate with limited resources, she explained during my interview. Your experience in both high-end research and practical problem-solving is exactly what we're looking for. And frankly, what happened at that science fair tells me you're raising the kind of innovative thinker we need in this field. The salary was modest, but it was a real engineering position with opportunities for advancement. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was using my education and skills properly. Janet, my supervisor at MedTech, was genuinely happy for me. You deserve this, Sarah. You've been wasted here. She paused, then added, would you be willing to consult on some of our projects? We could really use your expertise. Maya thrived in the new environment. She became something of a celebrity at school, invited to speak at science assemblies and mentor younger students. The confidence she'd gained from Dr. Morrison's recognition transformed her from a shy, brilliant girl into a young leader who wasn't afraid to share her ideas. A month after the science fair, Maya was invited to present her project at the State Young Inventors Conference. Standing on that stage, explaining her work to an audience of scientists and engineers, she looked every bit the confident innovator I'd always known she could be. We moved to a better apartment closer to my new job. It wasn't the mansion I'd once called home, but it was ours, earned through our own efforts and filled with the pride that comes from genuine accomplishment. Maya's room became a proper laboratory, with a dedicated workspace for her experiments and a bulletin board covered with her ongoing project. She was working on 3 different inventions simultaneously: an improved version of her water purification system, a device to help elderly people open jars safely, and a sorting machine for recycling that she'd designed after noticing how much waste our complex produced. Morrison became an informal mentor, checking in monthly to see Maya's progress and offering guidance on her projects. She has the rarest quality in science, he told me during one visit. She sees problems everywhere and immediately starts thinking of solutions. That's not something you can teach. 6 months after the science fair, Maya came home from school with a handmade card from a 3rd grader named Emma. The front showed a drawing of a girl in a lab coat, and inside, Emma had written in careful block letters, "Thank you for showing me that girls can be scientists too." Maya set the card on our kitchen table and looked at me with those wise eyes that seemed older than her 8 years. "Mom, do you think Daddy would be proud of my project?" I knelt down beside her chair, the same way I had when she was 5 and asking about broken family. "Baby, the people who matter most are already proud of you. You don't need anyone else's approval to know you're brilliant." She nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "Can we work on a new project together? I want to build something that helps kids who don't have enough food." As I looked at my daughter, this incredible person who'd inherited my analytical mind but paired it with a compassion I was still learning to cultivate, I realized that the science fair had given us both more than recognition. It had given us the courage to stop hiding our light under the bushel of other people's expectations.
The woman who'd once measured her worth by her husband's success was gone. In her place was someone I was proud to be, Maya's mother, an engineer, a problem solver, and a person who'd learned that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you refuse to let others define your value. That evening, as Maya sketched designs for her new project, I opened my laptop and began researching food insecurity in our community. We had work to do, my brilliant daughter and I, and for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to get started. Maya looked up from her sketches, pencil poised over a drawing of what looked like a mobile food distribution system. "Mom, what if we could make food trucks that also purify water, like help with two problems at once?" I smiled, remembering that 5-year-old who'd wanted to build a robot to fix broken families. She was still trying to fix the whole world, one brilliant idea at a time. "I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that's going to change the world, sweetheart." She grinned and went back to her sketches, and I went back to my research, both of us planning our next small revolution from our kitchen table.